Bonjour. So it's Thanksgiving, a time-honored tradition and one fraught with, if you're an Indigenous person, even more so if you um, had kind of a troubled childhood, like interracial childhood, like I did. Um, but it's still one worth trying to find something positive in, I think. So, uh, updates on my my quest. Oh my goodness. Um, I went back to that website and I combed through the 1,500 plus things, and I found this one site that's kind of has a page on my grandfather, basically about his work, uh, writing his autobiography, which I knew he did, and I knew it kind of wasn't available to me. Some archive had, some museum has it basically, but the whole page is kind of like um, attributing his efforts in trying to preserve his story and the amount of work and how hard it was um, for him at the time. Like no computers, no, he had to have someone help him type it up. I knew all that. The 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 website was kind of upsetting because it had all of these interviews with him, which was amazing, and I kind of want to listen to them, and I might later on, but they're all in Ojibwe, which is wonderful for those who know the language, which I don't. My father, my Ojibwe parent, did not want me to have the language, so I don't know it at all. I've tried to take a couple courses at university. It's nothing. I don't know if it's that I just can't learn it, like if it's an intellectual thing, or if it's a psychological thing, like an emotional thing, just from what I went through with my father's reaction when I was young and first trying to learn it. So like, it's kind of amazing that my grandfather, preserved this language and is part of preserving the language, and I can't be part of it. What was really weird to me about the website was it just starts at his working life when he was a young man, basically in his mid-20s, which is unusual because I looked through a few other pages on that website, and other people, they have like stories from their childhood, or if they went to residential school or whatever. But like my grandfather just starts when he was a young man. And what's really hard is everyone that that I could potentially ask is passed away. And when they were alive and I was asking the wrong questions because residential school wasn't in the public consciousness, and it wasn't in my consciousness at all at the time. And also because I was kind of obsessed with, I was the only child in my whole community growing up. And that's not an exaggeration. It was a community of 500. My mother was the supervisor of a local daycare. I'm sure I was the only child. It was a small Indigenous Catholic community. Every family was multiple families. And so when I'd hear stories of my grandfather, and I noticed that he didn't have any siblings, so I was like really obsessed with oh, he was an only child too. And the answers I got was always so, mostly changing the subject, but sometimes they were like very defensive and very like, what are you talking about? And the reason, and I did find this kind of registry of residential schools. I think it's archives of all the of residential schools, and I entered his name, and the results came up, which doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I do kind of think that he was at a residential school, because I remember my mother saying that my grandmother, his wife, talked about him having to be taken away to school. So that just seems like a residential school phrasing to me. I don't know. But anyway, so just kind of hit a dead end with that. Anyway, so Thanksgiving's kind of a weird holiday for Indigenous people. Growing up, I don't remember anyone celebrating it, and like the only time my mother would always cook a dinner if we were at home, or we'd go to visit my grandmother, and she would have this big Thanksgiving dinner, and like the Indigenous people, the people in my community, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles on my father's side of the family were always like, oh, that's a white holiday. And I think it's changed now. People do celebrate it in my home community. I think it changed because basically because more and more people were accessing post-secondary educational opportunities for Indigenous people, and universities and colleges coordinate their reading week with Thanksgiving. So, they would come home and say, well, all those white parents are happy to see their kids. They were all talking about Thanksgiving dinner. I honestly think that was the reason. But anyway, it's celebrated as kind of a family gathering now, I guess. Speaking of which, my hair is lemon fresh clean today. I don't usually wash my hair this day of the week. I do regularly, obviously, now, but it's not usually on this date. It's set dates on each week. But I did an extra one this week, and I also did that thing where you fill like a large bowl with hot water and squeeze like fresh lemon juice in it, and then dunk your head in it. So if I'm dripping a little bit, that would be why. I've decided that I am going to make Thanksgiving a time to break stereotypes, do something that breaks the stereotypes that harmed me when I was growing up. So, I don't know, last entry I was talking about how my white grandmother always punished me for, or judged me for being dirty as an Indigenous person. I've always been kind of curious and kind of felt kind of sympathetic towards American Indigenous people, because that's gotta suck. Like it's kind of packaged in with this complete nationalist lie. Oh, what a wonderful coming together story between the Pilgrims and the Wampum Indigenous person and persons, and always leaving out the fact that that it was actually the Wampum people that brought all the food, and the Pilgrims slaughtered them a year later. That doesn't really happen in Canada, and I was interested to find out why. I always knew it became a national holiday after it became a national holiday in America. The dates on that are 1621 and 1872, but apparently in the year 1578, English explorer Martin Frobisher did hold a Thanksgiving Day feast, because he was sure that he and his crew had not only found the Northwest Passage, but successfully navigated it. Which, oh my God, that is an effed up day in history class growing up, when you find out the only reason the country was mapped at all was to find the quickest way out of it again. And then every single history class was this just obnoxious, fiddly little lesson about, and then, these cartographers reached the end of this lake and determined it was not, and continued on with their endeavors, and for an entire year, and what at the end of the year was going to be the thrilling conclusion? Well, duh, we didn't find it. They didn't find it. There was no we. I don't know why I said we. I have no we. What a mess. What a mess my fucking life. Sorry. I shouldn't swear on this. Although I do always make sure to click the box. It's not for children. This is not for children. Getting back to children, what was I talking about? I was talking about me being an only child, and my grandfather apparently being an only child. I mean, until I find out otherwise, it just is very unusual, because I was. It was planned that way for me. My mother decided and stopped taking her pills, and then at the hospital after I was born, had an IUD immediately inserted. But none of that was available to my great grandmother, or unless it was a case of forced sterilization, which was something else that was apparently done to Indigenous people. And it's like the most horrible detective work ever, being curious about your own family and having absolutely no way of trying to find out. Like I said, it's like a choice between a deluge of 1574 files or zero. And even if you find one that actually is the person, it's not in a language I can understand. So Ugh, I did not want to end this journal on a depressing note. So I'm going to tell a story. What's my story? This one time we were visiting my white grandfather here in southern Ontario. And at that time, her house looked like something out of a Grimm's fairy tale. It had like those half sections of rocks that are then masoned in to make it look like it's an old tiny stone cottage or something in the woods. And it came into view, and I started singing that song, Over the River and Through the Woods, to grandmother's house we go. And my parents looked at me like I just lost my marbles, which I suppose I kind of had. But after a few minutes, I guess they decided it was kind of funny, and they laughed, and they were and my mother was kind of happy about it. She told my grandmother about it, and she was kind of happy about it. And one of them, I can't remember whether it was like my grandmother or my mother, bought me the whole collected work of Beatrix Potter, Peter Rabbit, and Thomas Kitten, and Jemima Puddle Duck. And I remember telling my father the story of Jemima Puddle Duck and the fox who was trying to get her and her eggs, and saying, it kind of reminds me of okay, apologies if this term offends people, because it isn't an offensive term. It's just in the late 80s, the term teachings wasn't known or understood, and it wasn't passed down, and it wasn't. The elders called them Indian stories, old Indian stories, when there were a bunch of kids together, and they, hey, come and listen to one of my old Indian stories, kids, and even disguising it in like that kind of a just kind of a toned down, pulled back term for it, like I think just to be able to tell it at all, probably, looking back on it. We all knew they were special, and at first he kind of looked like shocked, and I thought, oh shit, I made him mad. Like maybe it's like, maybe he's protective of those stories the way he's protective of the Ojibwe language, and I'm about to get this shit shaken out of me again. But then he kind of smiled and he said, you know what, maybe it is. And it's kind of interesting to me looking back now, thinking about them and the differences. The prey always gets away in kind of like, European stories. European stories, the prey always gets away. Not necessarily so in Indigenous stories, because the predators have to eat, or they're not there to be in the story. And it seems like such an interesting dichotomy, considering the sources, like considering if you were to like reduce the story of colonialism down to a story like that, you'd think the the European stories would be, you'd think it would be different, like switched, like the opposite. But no, it's not. Maybe, and I'm just thinking about like the stories that we hear growing up, and the stories that we remember, and the stories that we tell each other. And I just wonder if like there's some way of like reconciling emotional things like in the world that we don't want to be, but or to increase an understanding of if our situation is, we don't want it to be that situation, but it is not likely to change, to be different. And there's something kind of sadly beautiful in that. So, once again, happy Thanksgiving. Miigwech for listening to me.